I run a lot of testing with crate motors, and predictably, most of them are GM. Small block Chevy, big block Chevy, even LS. But it's time I ran a test with the other crate motor, a Ford. And not a small block Ford, because that wouldn't be other guys. I'm talking about a big block Ford. In this video, we're going to take a look at a ton of modifications we made on a 514 big block Ford stroker from Ford Racing back in the day. I mean, we did a ton of stuff. We tried cylinder heads, camshafts, and even NITROUS. So let's get going.
So obviously if you're going to go, you go big. You don't do a 429 Ford or even a 460 Ford. We stepped up to a 514, and this is an old crate motor because this test was run long ago, but it was a 514 crate motor offered by Ford Racing. And back then they offered it. It was a 514 stroker, had a cast crank, forged rods, forged pistons. It had the COBRA jet heads in it, designed by Kazi, and those had a 2.2, 1.76 valve package, 72 cc chambers, and they flowed about 293 CFM when we airflow tested them on the intake. About 180 on the exhaust, so they were not bad. They were, a good step up, obviously, from a factory head, and they worked pretty well. John did a good job on those early heads, and later on, he would design other heads that were obviously much more powerful than that combination. But this is what that head had. It also had a solid roller cam, which was unusual, and it might have even been a little problematic back then. I'm not sure. There were guys complaining about how long they lasted. Ours lasted a long time, but we only ever ran it on the dyno. But that cam had 647 lift, a 254-258 degree duration split at 112 degree lobe separation angle. It had a big single plane intake, and we ran it with an MSD. And we also topped it, since it was designed to accept a Dominator carb. We actually put back then we had Demon, so we put like a 1250 King Demon or something on it. So it had more than enough carburation. But we started out running it the way that we got it from Ford Racing, and we put big long tube headers on it. And it made 616 horsepower and 626 foot-pounds of torque. So we did a whole slew of modifications to this motor. We used it for a ton of stuff, for all of our Ford stuff. But one of the things we did first, right off the bat, even though this thing had a fairly decent roller cam in it, we decided to upgrade it with a set of roller rockers, and they were 1.8 ratio roller rockers, so it was a step up from the factory. And here's what happened. I mean, we picked up a lot of power. This is the most power I've ever seen with just a roller rocker change, and it told us that, hey, this thing probably wants more camshafts. So the power output jumped to 635 horsepower and 657 or 58 foot-pounds of torque. So it was quite a bit. It was a big change from just basically what is essentially a lift change, although effectively the duration changes by a couple of degrees as well. But this told us, hey, this thing wants more camshaft. So this was our first upgrade. Now let's take a look at what happened when we ran 3 different camshafts on this combination. After running that test on our 514 big block stroker 460, with the roller rockers, we were pretty excited. So we thought, we need to try some camshafts in this thing. Obviously, this thing is going to respond to camshafts. So rather than run we had the 647 lift, 254, 258 degree duration split, and 112 degree lobe separation angle cam that came with the combination. But we want to try 3 different cams. So the first one was actually smaller than this. We installed an Extreme Energy 275. Now these are all still solid roller cams, but this is a milder version, and you can see, as we would expect from a milder cam, it made more torque down low. And we say down low, we only started the run at 4,000 RPM, but it produced 640 foot-pounds of torque. But peak power was down to 610 horsepower, and you can see out here past 5,600 RPM, it fell off compared to the bigger cam that was supplied with the crate motor. So now let's take a look. Let's see what happened when we stepped up a couple of sizes to an Extreme Energy 286 roller, and that one was better than both of the cams. It made quite a bit more power. Peak power was up to 627 horsepower, and peak torque, we're not looking at this loaded number because that actually is not a real thing, 656 foot-pounds of torque. So we stepped up one final step because there was one step left up in the catalog, obviously, so you got to go right to the bottom of the page. So the next cam was a 292, and it picked up even more power and quite a bit at the top. So this thing really wanted some camshaft in it. That pushed peak power up to 664 horsepower and peak torque 668 foot-pounds of torque. And by the way, the cam specs on the 274 were 650, 657 lift split, a 236, 242 degree duration split, and 110 degree lobe separation angle. And on the 286, that stepped things up to 664, 671 lift split, a 248, 254 degree duration split at 110 degree lobe separation angle. And it's important to note that even though the 286 cam was technically smaller, I mean, it had less duration, it did have a little bit more lift, and it had a tighter lobe separation angle, and it had more aggressive ramp rates. That extreme energy cam worked out pretty well in there. And on the 292, finally we stepped up to 671, 678 lift split, a 254, 260 degree duration split, and 110 degree lobe separation angle. So as you can see, we made a lot more power by stepping up in camshaft, plus we got to do 3 cam stops, which was awesome on a 514 stroker big block Ford. So let's take a look at our next set of mods. After subjecting the 514 to a multitude of different camshafts, we decided to try something else, and since we had this thing up on the dyno, we're like, hey, we definitely got to add nitrous to it. It's got a big carburetor, it's got a big intake manifold, it's got enough camshaft, it's got all kinds of good stuff. So what it really needs now is more power, so we're going to add nitrous to it, and I'm going to show you what happened when we add the nitrous to it, and I'm also going to show you why you should never let anybody else activate the nitrous button when you're running on the dyno. So here is our combination. We have the best cam in it, the 292. When we were at 664 horsepower and 668 foot-pounds of torque. So it's got the good size roller cam in it. Here's what happened when we put a big nitrous plate on it. So, big jump up in power from 665 or so up to over 800. So we hit it with like 150 shot or so. It was a good combination, good plate system, nice and easy. But as you can see, we hit it out. That probably activated at about 4,500, and it's coming in. It's kind of all in, but at least by 5,000 there, because you're going to have a surge on the dyno, and all that's working out really well. We got a big spike at torque up here, 836 foot-pounds of torque, and then it kind of hovered around 800 for most of the run. Fell off a little bit here at the top because it got a little bit rich. But I'll show you what happens when you let somebody else control the control the nitrous activation button on the dyno. And they get a little spunky and activate it too early. So here's what happened, and you shouldn't do this on the dyno. It's kind of foolish. You see, they activated it real early, like at 4,000, which was about our load-in point. So right as we're loading it in, we're doing the load-in, and right as we're releasing the button to let the thing start going through the dyno test, they're hitting the nitrous button. So they're it's just a bad idea. It's like hitting the nitrous, I don't know, what idle or something. It's just ridiculous. But that's why you shouldn't have anybody else do that. You need the guy that's controlling it to be hitting the nitrous button, and that's why I normally do it. Back in the day, this was not me doing this kind of shenanigans, although it's fairly exciting. So now let's take a look and see. We'll take a look at our final test here. So we'll get rid of our nitrous runs, but that was an easy 800 horsepower, no problem. So we'll get rid of our nitrous runs. Now we're back to our 665 horsepower, 664 horsepower deal with the good camshaft. But after running the standard COBRA jet heads, which worked fairly well and obviously better than a factory head, this was right as they'd come out with the Super COBRA jet heads, also John Causey stuff. So we put the Super COBRA jet heads on, and they were a bit better than the COBRA jet heads. They flowed about 318 CFM, up from 293 when we did the airflow testing, compared the two heads. And the exhaust port was up from 180 to like 214. So both good gains there, and it shows here in the results too. There we saw some good power. So here's what happened when we put the COBRA jet heads in, or the Super COBRA jet heads in place of the COBRA jet heads. And it also should be noted that in order for me to install the Super COBRA jet heads and run this test, I had to take the ISKI cutting tool and cut valve reliefs in all of the pistons, because the Super COBRA jet valve placement is different than it is on the COBRA jet. So our piston only had valve reliefs, that the piston that were run in that crate motor only had valve reliefs for the COBRA jet head. So we had to cut our own valve reliefs so that we had enough piston to valve clearance for the Super COBRA jet heads with this camshaft. So it was a little bit of a procedure. It was much more than just a simple head install. But here's what happened after we got the Super Cobra Jet heads all dialed in. It's a lot of power. I think we actually may have run into, that might be a spring issue or something out there at the top. These things should certainly rev higher than that. But we picked up a lot of power everywhere, even down low. I mean, we picked up a ton. The peak torque was up to 725 foot-pounds, and peak power was over 700 horsepower, 702. So nice gains from the Super Cobra Jet heads. And now you could expect even more from an Airflow Research head or a Kazi head or a lot of the other stuff that's available now. This was all stuff back in the day. But again, from Cobra Jet to Super Cobra Jet, good gains on this combination, and even more so if we were to have what I think is a cure that spring issue there. So these are our mods on our 514. Let's get to our conclusion.
Okay guys, what did you think about the test on our 514 big block Ford stroker from Ford Racing? You know, the other stroker. Here's what I can tell you. Back in the day, the guys from Westech were more than a little concerned when I took the cutter to their brand new Ford Racing crate motor. A little bit concerned, but it all turned out well. Now look at the power output. Equipped with that 292 cam and the Super Cobra Jet heads, the thing made over 700 horsepower, which would be pretty sporty in a Fox Mustang back in the day, especially after you hit it with a big shot of nitrous. I'm Richard Holder, guys. Like, share, subscribe, do all that stuff. More testing coming up.